This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Brian Peña. I always join the Vito podcast, the best podcast in the United States.
And welcome to the latest and freshest edition of Tiger Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Geronimo Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and broadcast partner and fun. That is the Doc from Doc and Jack, John Charles Macaroon. And John, really quick, so the Tigers broke their 9-game losing streak, but still have only won one game in their last 13. So not very solid out of the Tigers over the course of the last week, and more than that at this point.
Vito, always enjoy talking baseball with you. Obviously, wins and losses aren't going to be really a factor going forward with the Detroit Tigers. We know they're bad, they're playing bad, but within a game of baseball, there are certain things that you look for. Consistency, attitude, good hustle, fundamentals. And in the losses to the Marlins and to the Baltimore Orioles, it's kind of now when you peek at a game, and you and I, we're not going to stop watching. I know from time to time when we report on games, people will message us on Twitter, on our Twitter page, at Detroit Podcast. Who cares? The Tigers stink. We all know it. But at the same time, you and I, we are baseball fans. We're fans of all things Detroit sports. So we're going to watch, and we're going to dissect what we see. The one thing I want to ask you and to start this podcast with is, what do you make of all the fundamental mistakes? I mean, Ronnie Rodriguez is a guy that has produced offensively. He's a guy that you root for. You want him to do well, but the amount of errors that are taking place defensively is ridiculous, similar to Candelario, and that got his ass shipped back down to the minors. Ronnie Rodriguez is not playing well defensively. Nick Castellanos is making routine base running mistakes. You saw that play where there was nobody covering second base, for the outfielders to throw to. So when you look at fundamentals, that goes right back to Ron Gardenhire. I don't understand why the fundamentals of the game, running hard, getting to every single base, hustling, has been an issue for the last 3 weeks. I don't think it's a confidence issue. It's a matter of going out there, playing the game the right way. And right now, the Detroit Tigers have made baseball look really, really hard. And what do you make of it?
Where's the nearest bar? Where's the alcohol? I tweeted that out in reference to Ron Gardenhire and what he might think and must think when it comes to the Tigers' miscues, and it's base running miscues, it's fundamental issues, it's a lack of effort at times. And you brought up Ronnie Rodriguez. Well, he had the hot bat for a long period of time there when he first got called up, so it was looking solid. But since, his production has tailed off, and then he's not the greatest fielder at shortstop either, really isn't a major league shortstop. So then you have to bring up, how about Willi Castro, a guy that's hitting at AAA Toledo? He's hitting .339 with a .919 OPS. So this guy has hit so far down at AAA. Why not call him up and get rid of Ronnie Rod? Or you move Ronnie Rod, what they would do, into a backup role. Relegate him to backup duties, to utility starting stuff. You want, I think, a guy like that to be sitting more often. Because a guy like Willi Castro, I think, is a more valuable asset to the team moving forward at least. So Ronnie Rod, relegate him to the backup, to the utility duties, and make sure you make a spot on that major league roster for Willi Castro.
In the last 2 weeks, 12 losses in their 13 games. And the play has been abysmal. It hasn't been fun to watch. And you look at it and you go, with the likes that they have, they should be at least able to play fundamentally sound baseball. And like I said, it speaks to what's going on right now. I don't know if they're getting too much up in their heads. I don't know if the losing now is getting to them. But at the same time, you look at it, and when you watch a game of baseball, you expect certain things. And to see the Detroit Tigers go out there and not look major league ready is really tough to watch game in and game out. And Ron Gardenhire, obviously wins and losses. We look at it, and there are games where, umpires kind of dictate certain things, the game versus the Marlins that went to extra innings. Jacoby Jones, you could argue, I think it was in the 11th inning. Maybe the ball was outside, and you say the Tigers got screwed there. But, Vito, I truly believe you make your own luck. And the Tigers right now are just playing a brand of baseball that is really, really challenging to watch 12 of 13 games losses, and unfortunately, there are not a lot of positive things to look at right now.
Well, the month of May, too, well under 500. One of the worst months of baseball for the Tigers, probably right up there in the last decade. So you have to play better baseball. You have to be more consistently given the effort. And so the production might wear away at times, might, be there and not be there from game to game because the Tigers aren't that great of a roster talent-wise. But you want to see the effort. You want to see the guys hitting the cutoffs. You want to see the guys playing it safe and smart on the base paths. And we haven't seen the smart base running for a large portion of this season, including on Monday on Memorial Day with Nick Castellanos. I don't know what the hell he was doing. He was going off of second base a little bit, and because he leaned off so much, well, he got thrown out. And he was in between, not even tagging up to go to third, but was just kind of testing out the guy in the outfield to see if he makes a mistake, and then he can go over there to third, as in the case of maybe an errant throw to third base. So the Orioles didn't make a mistake, though, with throwing the baseball. They didn't throw the baseball around. So Nick Castellanos was left out there in the middle of nowhere land and got picked off ultimately, and that's a base running miscue you can't have at the major league level, Doc.
Can't have it, especially from the likes of Nick Castellanos, Miguel Cabrera. Obviously, it was nice to see him get, a home run, but only still two on the season.
I know.
It's one in which you say, okay, obviously we're looking at it. He's hitting the ball hard. He's contributing, but power numbers, and like Jason Beck said on DetroitSportsPodcast.com and on the podcast, he said that he sees Miguel Cabrera kind of fitting and looking like Maglio Ordonez when he was, a player that was contributing, but his power numbers dipped a little bit, but later on in his career was a solid hitter. And that's what Miguel Cabrera can be, but I'm not so certain that the fans are going to really want that, especially at this point in time, especially with how much money he's making. That's the biggest challenge is Miguel Cabrera's contract right now is starting to show, and a couple other contracts as well are not so bad. But along with Miguel, there's a couple other contracts that are kind of hindering the Detroit Tigers at this point in time. But do you see the slide continuing? Is there anything besides calling up different people, letting people go? Because, you hear about certain moves that are made. Right now, it seems like the Tigers are desperate for any reliever. You heard about the pickup that took place from the Texas Rangers, I believe. He was a player that was let go, and the Tigers picked him up.
They've picked up two relievers now recently. Guys that had a little bit of major league experience, but stuff from a long time ago. So it's just they don't have the perfectly put together roster. So the thing is, you're going to have to rely upon AAA dudes, maybe AA dudes eventually. And AA level, by the way, guys, is really the hardest level of minor league competition. So those guys really are being groomed for big league success one day and maybe sooner than later. Now, the AAA dudes are the guys that are 4A players. So some of these guys, though, are better than what the Tigers currently have on their major league roster once again. Ronnie Rod, I'll go back to him. He should be starting in utility spots, should be used in that role as a utility player, and that's it moving forward. Okay, he's not a starting major league shortstop, and he's not really a guy that can play shortstop that adequately. So you don't want him getting a lot of innings there. You don't want Gordon Beckham getting a lot of innings there. So once again, I go back to a guy like Willi Castro, who's down on the farm at AAA Toledo and hitting the hell out of the baseball right now, and he's young, and he's great defensively. He's regarded as the best defensive infielder in the Tigers farm system currently, and much better than Ronnie Rod or Gordon Beckham at shortstop. Guys that really aren't prototypical shortstops once again, and should be playing second base or first base. Okay, they aren't shortstop. So you have guys playing out of position on top of all the Tigers' miscues defensively with, missing the routine plays, with the base running miscues. But once again, it boils down to guys like Nick Castellanos having to do better than what he showcased on Monday when it came to running the bases. You expect more out of him as a team leader, Doc. And he's a guy represented by Scott Boras now. He's looking to get paid handsomely this offseason. And he's not hitting the greatest still, as we talked about last week. Can't really field out there in right field, doesn't have a true position on the diamond game to game. So we know all of that about Nick C. And then he's going to make a dumbass base running mistake. You can't have that happen when you're Nick Castellanos. And anybody on the Tigers roster can't be doing that. But then when it is one of your team leaders, man, it makes it look that much more worse than it already is.
Yeah, the Tigers made a couple small moves. They added 32-year-old right-handed reliever Austin Adams from the Minnesota Twins. Correct myself there. I was thinking about the Rangers because the Tigers play them. I was looking over the upcoming schedule. interesting teams coming into Comerica Park in June. A lot of home games that you and I will have the privilege of covering. And they designated Gregory Soto back down to the minors and added lefty Matt Hall to the rotation, to help out in the bullpen, because the bullpen just isn't right now helping out the cause as well as it should be. So it's kind of like a rotation there, trying to do the best that they can, up and down, and try to get any arms that can consistently perform for the Tigers. It's just, I understand what we're saying here is that the Tigers, in essence, are not playing very well, and the talent on the roster is not that good. And right now, a lot of the talk has been negative. I want to ask you this in terms of Ron Gardenhire. Should he take actions against veterans? Should he send a message against a guy like Nick Castellanos if he makes that mistake in the field? And right then and there, everyone's looking, Miggy's confused, everyone's wondering, what are you doing? If a player like that makes a mistake that's maybe of the mental variety, do you already that you know that this guy is gripping, he's trying, obviously emotionally he's not really happy because of his contract, do you sit him? Do you say to yourself, no, this guy does not get to go on the field? Because I'm not seeing that exactly in terms of, the likes of Jeimer Candelario after so many games and things like that. Ronnie Rodriguez has been given chance after chance. He's still on the roster. Do you take actions in a punitive manner against a guy like Nick Castellanos for those fundamental mistakes? Because it's not a talent issue. It's an issue of thinking. It's an issue of, hey, where's your head at?
Yeah.
You run to second base, you stop, you follow the signs.
You don't get that far off of second base. You should know better. You're a team leader, and once again, you're a major leaguer. It boils down to that, Doc. Just being a major leaguer. You should know better, perform better. And Ron Gardenhire, if I would have been him on Monday, I would have reamed him a new one. Because Nick Castellanos deserved to be sat down, and you were asking me that or going to get to that officially, Doc. I think he should have been sat down. Any veteran player, any player, regardless of tenure and time in the big leagues, should be sat down and then make that kind of base running miscue when you're a team that can't afford to have mistakes because you're not talented as a team. So you can't afford to have even a minuscule mistake like that and a mistake you shouldn't be making. And as a little leaguer, when I was growing up and playing Little League Baseball, Doc, I knew not to make that mistake. And actually, when I saw that happen on Memorial Day, I said to my brother and to my dad that I know I wouldn't have made that mistake. That's one thing where I would have done better than Nick Castellanos. And that's a guy getting paid a lot of money once again who's looking to cash in this offseason with a big contract, courtesy of his agent, Scott Boras. Right now, I don't think he really deserves an agent like Scott Boras. And he truly deserved to be sat down on Monday after that incident.
And that it speaks to Ron Gardenhire. I think that he recognizes the roster that he has. He recognizes these are, a bunch of cats that, many people don't really speak highly of, and day in, day out. I know he's talking about, staying positive. He knows that people are going to talk negatively about the team. People are going to, maybe from overseas, come up with rumors that Bartolo Colón is going to be signed, which I thought was funny. But I kind of was like, well, it'd be an interesting story. Maybe this guy will, with a little bit of personality, would come in here. But you don't think he's got a lot to give, do you? Should the Tigers pursue a guy like Bartolo Colón? Something outside the box? Because the only other name that people are talking about is Dallas Keuchel, but the Tigers don't have the money in the budget to go out and get a guy like that. They're not even going to try to flip him, so they're just going to keep bringing up guys from the minors. It's just a situation where we don't really see a lot of relief in sight for the play that we see on the field.
They're reaching for stuff. They're picking for stuff that's not out there, that's not attainable, and Dallas Keuchel isn't going to happen. They don't have the resources, and they're not willing to pay the money that Dallas Keuchel desires. Right now, Bartolo Colón, the Big Sexy, I love the nickname Big Sexy. Bring him over, okay? Bring him on board for the flair and to see him bad in interleague play, and just because he is the Big Sexy. And honestly, at 45, I think he is now, Doctor, something like that. He still can pitch almost as well, if not better, than Ryan Carpenter and some other dudes on the Tigers' big league roster right now. And that's why on Monday, actually, of this week, Doc, I joked with my brother and dad that go out and get Nolan Ryan. Will he pitch again? At 60-something or 70 years old, Doc, Nolan Ryan might still throw better and be more effective than the likes of Ryan Carpenter right now. So that is how dismal the outlook for the Tigers is currently, and it's because of a 6-18 month of May. They won 6 games out of 24 chances in the month of May. That's how bad, how despicable the Tigers have become, and they are falling rapidly, but putting themselves into contention for the number 1 overall draft pick in next year's amateur draft. And they have the number 5 overall selection coming up this June. So they gotta make the right selection. And we'll dive into that a little bit as well as time goes on this week's episode of Tigers Talk.
Before we get to our first break here, and I want to thank the sponsors that make this broadcast possible, I want to thank the Detroit Sports Commission and DC Sports over there located at Lakeside Mall. In terms of what we saw, obviously we're looking at the Tigers, but did anything that you observed with the New York Mets or Baltimore Orioles, catch your attention at all?
Well, no, they're just not good teams. I mean, I was saying to you as a topic possibility, the Orioles or Tigers, who are worse off right now? Orioles long-term definitely actually are. The Tigers are more optimistically looking positive moving forward. But currently with those two big league teams stacked up against each other, they're both really bad clubs. Now, the Orioles have no pitching whatsoever, though. At least the Tigers have Matthew Boyd. So I think the Tigers have the edge because of that, Doc. But because of their depleted state as a team and specifically with their pitching, the Orioles are not that far off from the Tigers right now. Once again, with the long-term play of the Tigers and their aim to be good moving forward next 2, 3, 4 years from now, well, the Tigers have the better long-term outlook. But near future or short-term outlook, Tigers and O's are real close to one another, and that's why this series right now going on in Baltimore Camden Yards is a very despicable matchup for Major League Baseball.
All right, in the second half of the podcast, what's on your mind?
We got to dive into who the Tigers are going to take at number 5 overall. Also, a new segment I want to debut with you, Doc, and it's called Dinger Forecast. Okay, we'll dive into that and pick one hitter we think that for sure is going to hit a home run, and actually who's going to hit the most home runs of the Tigers until next week's episode. All of that and more in the second half of this week's episode of Tigers Talk. And Doc, as you know, our two fine sponsors of Tigers Talk are DC Sports at Lakeside Mall in Sterling Heights and the Detroit Sports Commission. And DC Sports Detroit can be found on Twitter at DC Sports Detroit and online at DetroitCitySports.com. Two great signings coming up at DC Sports, and the Chase Winovich signing on June 15th, and Sweet Lou Whitaker, who should be a Hall of Famer. He has his autograph signing session on June 30th at DC Sports. For all of that and more regarding DC Sports, once again, please go online to DetroitCitySports.com. And for the Detroit Sports Commission, which has been bringing marquee events to the Metro Detroit area since 2001, please follow the DSC on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports. And make sure to check out the Detroit Sports Commission's terrific website at DetroitSports.org.
Now, Vito, in our chronicles of covering the Tigers, another unusual event happened to me when I was covering the Tigers, okay?
What was that now?
Now, now when you go with me that I'm kind of absent-minded, okay?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, exactly. So I go, and obviously when you go into the media entrance. So good, this time around I had my badge, and I go into the elevator, okay? But there's a photographer that gets in with me. And, just fine young lady gets in there. And, obviously the elevator, I think it's two-sided. It has buttons on both sides,
yes,
right?
Yes, it
okay.
does.
So I read away, and obviously I'm in my own world. I'm thinking about some tweets. I'm thinking about a bunch of other things, okay? And I get in the elevator, and automatically I just push the number where I got to go, all right? So I didn't think about the lady. I didn't think about anything else. I wasn't even paying attention. I wasn't intentionally trying to be rude, okay? And I'm assuming that she's going to the same place I am, because you got to remember, there are different areas in the ballpark that people go. There's the press box, there's the photography area, and things like that. But I was in La La Land. I wasn't really paying attention. So all of a sudden, the door opens up again. And I'm like, what happened? And I didn't understand. And remember, I hit the button first. I hit up to open the elevator. So obviously, then the elevator door opens again. We're waiting. Nobody comes in. It shuts again. So I'm just waiting there. And the lady all of a sudden says to me, you could be a gentleman. And I said, excuse me? And I didn't understand what was going on. Like, I was just standing there minding my own business, and she said, well, you could be a gentleman. And I said, huh? And I was totally confused because, those moments where you're trying to register what the person's saying, but you don't understand. And she didn't give the direction like, oh, you should do this, you should do that. So then I think she pushed the button to go down. And I'm thinking, well, I pushed the button to go up. Why'd you get on the elevator? I thought maybe that it was going up, and it could have been going down, and I just got on it. So you never know in that scenario. But in terms of what I said to her, I just said, oh, I'm sorry, my bad. I'm kind of sleep deprived. I'm not really paying attention. And I just walked off. And I just, when I left, I just said to myself, why would she say that to me? She could have just been bolder and a little bit more directive and said, hey, I'm trying to go down. And just because sometimes you have to assume somebody's not paying attention. Why did she assume I wasn't being a gentleman? I wasn't rude. I keep to myself. and I just didn't like that interaction. But I thought it was funny the entire way. I was thinking, and I said to her, I'm sorry, I'm not really paying attention, and da-da-da-da-da. But I'll ask you, should I have been more aware in the elevator or like make conversation? Because a lot of people I see in elevators, they strike up conversation, say, hi, how you doing? Me, I just want to get in the elevator, push the button, and go about my business. And I look at it and I do treat it like I'm kind of working. So I wasn't even paying attention. I wasn't being malicious, but the lady, gave it to me. And she was, older and made me feel like I was totally disrespectful. I felt bad. And hopefully I don't ever run into her again because, she left a bad taste in my mouth.
She should be rimming you a new one. Or she wanted to. Almost did like Ron Gardenhire should have been doing Nick Castellanos and the rest of his team.
Did I make a fundamental mistake?
I think you made a fundamental mistake in epic proportions, okay? Treat a lady with respect and the respect that she deserves, Doc. You should know that you're married, been married for how long? 7, 8 years now? You should know how to treat a lady better.
What should I have done? That's the question.
Well, I think you could spark up conversation. I know you, though, your mind is aimless and is thinking about your tweets. It's always focused on Twitter and social media and what I'm going to tweet out next. Well, don't always be focused on that. Survey the room and feel it out and see who's in there and, say hello. How are you? And maybe spark up a tiny conversation. Okay. Think about the next time that you're in an elevator, okay, in that kind of situation.
In all honesty, what if I don't want to?
I know you don't want to. I know you don't want to. That's the truth, but you have to fake it until you make it at times, too. And that's a key to life, to succeeding in life, in many different aspects of life.
But if you want to go to the other party, if you're somebody that experiences someone like me who's kind of not really paying attention, shouldn't she have been a little bit more bold and assertive and said, hey, I'm going down, please push SL, and just say it?
Probably could have told you.
Yeah.
Could have spoken up.
Excuse me.
But you could have also noticed better and then been able to accommodate the lady in a better fashion.
But we also have to be aware we are in a more distractible world. Remember, she could have
you got your phone. You have your phone in your hands, too, and you're on Twitter already?
No, I was
already on Twitter or no?
I was just staring at the buttons. I was just staring and looking
Staring
around.
aimlessly. Thinking about what, your wife, your beautiful wife at home, and what she's looking like currently because you can't see her at that point?
I probably was thinking, please hit like 10 home runs, something exciting, something newsworthy. Please let this game be somewhat enjoyable because I'm coming here quite a bit and things like that. So I was just daydreaming in my thoughts. I wasn't really thinking about her. So I would have liked her to say, hey, excuse me, can you please push SL? And I would have said, oh, did I walk in here on accident? Because it's one elevator. I pushed up, so... But anyways, if you run into me and I'm not paying attention, just say excuse me and give me the directive because don't assume that I'm even paying attention to what I'm supposed to be doing because, to share and you'll get more of the details on this week's Two Bad Hombres. I went on a reporting outing with Vito and left my key somewhere and didn't even know where I was going.
Yes, he did.
And that's how I roll. I'm forgetful. I got a lot on my mind. And sometimes, you're doing stuff and you're like just really, what's the word? You're just not paying attention. You're not with it. You're just kind of doing what you got to do. You're trying to focus on a couple other things. And my focus was not on being the elevator person and taking care of business. You know what I mean? And usually, the funny part is 9 times out of 10, there's somebody there pushing the buttons for you.
There wasn't somebody as well. In your defense a little bit. You were dazed and confused. Yeah. You really were. And the next time you see a guy like Doc or, the real Doc, you just say, hey, Mr. Old ugly man. Yeah. Hey, can you pay attention here? Okay.
Exactly.
And accommodate me, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Give me the time of day a little bit.
Exactly.
But anyways.
And sometimes you can naturally assume, oh, I pushed one. And you say, oh, no, I'm not going to one. Please push SL. No problem. I'll take care of business and get you to where you need to go. But don't say, can you be a gentleman? I am a gentleman. I have 2 daughters and a wife. I am a gentleman. So
you are.
I will put that out there.
Most of the time. Once again, excuse me, Mr. Bald-headed ugly man.
Exactly.
Could you please push the elevator button? Typically, there is somebody, though, there in the elevator in your defense, once again, at least a little bit.
Exactly. All right, what do you got for me in the second half of the podcast? What do we talk about?
I was going to say, to excite the masses here, how about the Tigers' number 5 overall pick on June 3rd in the Major League Baseball Amateur Draft? Currently looking at, from what I've heard now, what I've read, Andrew Vaughn, a first baseman from California.
Vaughn!
How about Vaughn? Now, not Rick Vaughn from Major League, okay? Not that guy, but a guy that can hit, too. Gets on base, hits for average, hits for power, most importantly, too. And doesn't strike out a ton and actually walks more than he strikes out. As this guy, Andrew Vaughn, first baseman once again from California, won Golden Spikes honors last season when he batted .402 with 23 home runs and a 44-18 walk to strikeout ratio as a sophomore. So this kid does profile to be a guy that will have a high OBP, hit for enough power, and just hit the hell out of the ball and spray it to all parts of the diamond. And that's what these teams have to love about him, and the Tigers do as well because of their current situation with the likes of Nico Goodrum there, Miguel Cabrera there. Miguel Cabrera going to be with the Tigers long term because of that albatross of a deal until 2023. But He's already playing a lot of DH, Miggy is, so you shift him over permanently if you draft Andrew Vaughn and if Andrew Vaughn works out. Now, another name to consider is a guy that Bleacher Report mentioned and actually has the Tigers picking in their mock draft, and that is shortstop C.J. Abrams from Blessed Trinity Catholic High School in Georgia. And it says here, Doc, the Tigers would be thrilled to see Abrams still on the board when their turn comes up. MLB.com likened him to D. Gordon, while noting he has considerably more pop than the Seattle Mariners speedster. He may eventually wind up at second base or in center field, but his game-chasing speed and changing speed more precisely and feel for hitting make him an attractive pick as a future table setter. So two dudes right there, and they are position players because the Tigers' current state in their farm system is much depleted when it comes to their position players.
Yeah, and I guess what we have to also include is, can we get a hitter that has plate discipline?
Right.
Somebody
get on base. This guy, once again, Andrew Vaughn, more walks and strikeouts. Tigers are clamoring for that, and will love that. And it could come in the form of Andrew Vaughn at number 5 on June 3rd in that Major League Baseball amateur draft.
Like we talked about last week, the swings were still pretty bad this week by many of the Tigers. The batting averages, when you look, oh my gosh, they flash them right there on the big board. They're not good. And when you look at swinging and the pitches that the Detroit Tigers are actually swinging at, they're making it a little too easy for the opponent to get them out. And again, the offense has been a struggle. One thing that has been talked about, Vito, and I guess I'll look at it and I'll explain it to you like this. I think it's understandable now, and many people recognize that the Detroit Tigers need a plethora of position players in the next 2 years. Now, if they can target, players like you mentioned, Vaughn, and others that can actually contribute to the Tigers and play a solid position, play defense well, I do think that in the coming years, do you trust Al Avila to go out there now and pick guys that can actually come in and contribute and play the field? Because right now, people are not. They're not sold on Al Avila. They're very critical. They're very underwhelmed by what we've seen. And you're looking at some of the returns on some of the trades that he's made. People are starting to clamor and go, man, you got rid of, and we talked about it as well in previous podcasts, we've gotten rid of some big names, and some of the names we've gotten back, like Jamer Candelario, guys that are going to contribute, haven't just been really contributing as well as we would have thought. And you realize, man, a lot of these guys get sent to the minors. They're not producing as well. They're still not coming up. So I know people's patience has run thin. But Al Avila, if he works with the scouting department, if he recognizes and utilizes analytics to the truest form, I think he can go out there and find some guys that are going to be productive and be some guys that can hit the baseball. Especially, I'm saying this. What do the fans expect? The Tigers were going to suck. I mean, is it one of those things that you have to suck a certain way? I'm not mad at it. I go and I understand that the Tigers are going to lose. I'm actually like, you know what? As a guy that calls for tanking, this is fine. The fundamentals I would like to see a little bit better because, I don't think any of these guys, I would say on this roster, there's maybe 2 or 3 guys that could be part of the future. But I'm kind of assuming this is only year 2 of a rebuild, and the majority of the guys that are going to be, called upon to do things aren't at the big club right now. So that's why you don't see me getting all that mad. I definitely understand what I'm seeing. I'm not seeing quality baseball, but many of the talent that we're going to expect to be part of this rebuild are playing in AA, and they're playing in Toledo in AAA. So isn't that the fairest way to say, why is there so much anger on a team that everyone kind of thought was going to suck anyway?
Because people don't get it. They're not true baseball fans, don't understand the game of baseball and a rebuild and how long it truly takes. So they're overreacting because for me, it's about a long-term play. The long-term goals of the Tigers are to be good within 3 to 4 years from now, let's say. So a rebuild, you have to endure through suffering and a lot of pain and losing.
Years. Yeah.
Bad years in a row consecutively. So 3-4 years consecutively of losing and meaning well below 500 records. But you suck it up because guess what? You're going to accumulate a lot of great assets via the draft.
Yeah.
So you got to go for that and have that in mind that you're going to take some great talent at the top of the draft. Now, you got Casey Mize already, number 1 overall pick last year. You have the number 5 pick this year. You might get Abrams. You might get Vaughn. So one of those dudes that can hit the baseball. The next year, right now, you're almost playing for the number 1 overall pick again. So you get that number 1 overall selection. Just don't mess it up. And then you have another great prospect for the future to build around. So the Tigers are slowly but surely building up their farm system, and their depth when it comes to position players and overall middle to top tier talent. And you need that for a rebuild to be successful. Meaning, once again, you have to endure through a lot of losing. It's going to take a while, 3-4 years, 4-5 years, and you got to suck it up, take it all in, and deal with it ultimately. If you can't, jump off the ship right now and leave the Tigers. Forget about being a fan because it's going to be bad for a couple of more years at least.
Yeah, Vito, but the disappointing part is, look at some of the trades that have been made. The David Price trade, Yoenis Cespedes, Justin Upton, J.D. Martinez, Alex Avila and Justin Wilson, Ian Kinsler, Justin Verlander. Can you name any of the guys that have been picked up as a result of those trades that has made a difference that you say, oh, this guy's the guy of the future? I mean, Isaac Paredes is somebody that we're talking about. People are obviously really happy with some of the pitchers, and obviously they're really thrilled with some of the high-end talent. Casey Mize being the number one pick. He's obviously dominating Double-A. He's probably going to be very, very much talked about and maybe even brought up in September, but I think his next move is going to be to Triple-A. I think he's going to blow right by Double-A Erie. I mean, he's every time he goes out there, he's producing a lot of highlights. But are any of the names that were brought back, obviously Perez was somebody that people talk about, but now he's getting the moniker of being injury prone, so that's kind of dampered, spirits there. It's one of those things where you say all those players were let go, and you don't really have a lot in return in terms of the wealth of talent that you could have got. Look at that. That's 7 players, Vito. And to recap, David Price, Cespedes, Justin Upton, J.D. Martinez, Alex Avila, Justin Wilson, Ian Kinsler, Justin Verlander. 7 players. You could theoretically, if you were a top-notch GM, gotten 2 players, really solidly. 14 players that could have been maybe even playing or contributing in the major leagues. It's not happening.
Well, Paredes is from the Cubs trade, where they traded Avila and Justin Wilson to the Cubbies. They got Jeimer Candelario on that deal, too, who was hitting at one point. Obviously, this first half of the season so far hadn't been hitting, and that's why he was sent down to AAA Toledo to work on his game. So, hopefully, developing better plate skills and just overall hitting ability for when he's called up again. Now, in that Franklin Perez deal, you had mentioned that was Justin Verlander going to the Houston Astros. The Tigers also got Daz Cameron, the son of Mike Cameron, who's at AAA Toledo, and catcher Jake Rogers, who can throw out runners, has been hitting better than Daz Cameron. But Cameron has been struggling. So yes, a lot of fans are up in arms about the Tigers' current rebuild because the guys that are down on the farm or in the bigs right now aren't hitting. And I mean, look at these guys right now in their lineup, everyday lineup. They don't get on base. They suck. Okay, they suck when it comes to their OBPs. So this is a team-wide issue. At catcher, Grayson Griner, 248 OBP. John Hicks, who also plays catcher, 273 OBP. Nico Goodrum, 303 OBP. Josh Harrison, 219. Ronnie Rod is down to 262. Jeimer before being sent down to AAA, 285. Christian Stewart may be one of the guys that will last 3-4 years from now because he's a left-handed hitter and hits for some pop. Only has a 303 OBP, just like Nico Goodrum. So you go from top to bottom, Doc, with this everyday lineup, and there's a ton of guys that don't get on base. Miguel Cabrera right now is making $30 million, is the best OBP guy, but he's not hitting for power to be worth that $30 million per season. He's at 370 right now for his OBP clip. So that's great.
What's
but
mediocre?
He's not slugging.
Those numbers sound terrible.
350 or above is good for on-base percentage. So Miguel Cabrera is above average right now with OBP. But everything else, well, he's not doing well enough. Really can't feel, can't move on the bases, and doesn't hit for power. Okay? That's a big-time issue when you're making $30 million annually. But the team-wide issue is OBP. And you look at all those guys, and who is going to be around for the long-term future of the Tigers' current everyday lineup? Maybe, just maybe, but you need a couple of maybes, maybe 3 or 4 maybes really, to talk about Christian Stewart being around for the long-term future of the Tigers. And he's not the greatest fielder, though, or all-around bat. Hits for some pop, but he has to get on base more often and hit for average more often. If he doesn't start doing that, or within the next year or so, he's another guy they'll end up cutting ties with, ultimately, Doc.
And to further discuss my question, I think some of the fans, too, they react to who they're playing. When you're playing the Marlins, Mets, Baltimore, those are like the bottom feeders. And earlier this year, the Tigers had some success, were playing well. And so, it maybe raises expectations that, hey, we're bad, but we're not that bad. But I think here at the Tigers Talk podcast, no, we'll claim they're that bad. The Tigers are in the class of the Mets, the Marlins, the Baltimore Orioles. I know it's hard to hear, but look, listen to us and, take it for what it's worth. The Tigers this year are going to be abysmal. They're not going to be that great. And hopefully, Al Avila, in terms of when the rebuild starts, obviously lets go of all these guys and stops bringing in guys that are kind of like filler. Right now, the tough part is you're hearing these names that are being brought in, and everybody knows, well, it's filler. There's no impactful name that's going to come in and make everybody go, wow, this guy's going to contribute right away. There's no difference maker on the Detroit Tigers. And actually, you can start to say when you have a slide like this where you make the same mistakes over and over and over, you can even honestly start to pinpoint and ask, who are the leaders? What kind of leadership are they showing?
There are no veteran leaders inside that clubhouse. Miguel Cabrera's never been a true leader. Nick Castellanos right now, is he a team leader who might be shipped out anyways at some point nearing that trade deadline of July 31? They don't have a true team leader. I would say Matthew Boyd. Matthew Boyd, Mr. Nice Guy, I like to call him because he really is a genuine nice guy. I love the guy. I think he's a true team leader for the club right now. He might get dealt as well. So once these guys get dealt, who's going to step up and be the team leader for the Tigers?
Yeah, exactly. The big stories that we're talking about are when players, stand out there for the anthem and, have some hijinks with the other team.
Right, how long they stand out there.
That was interesting to see that in terms of how it played out. Everyone's like, oh, what's going on? And that's really the talking points, is stuff off the field, things that are being talked about aren't really related to wins and losses. It's just unfortunate. And then obviously, Shane Green was super reliable. He blew a save, and that resulted in a loss. Games earlier in the year in which the Tigers were winning, now they're losing close games, and it's unfortunate now the Tigers are way under 500. And right now they're mired in a long stretch of baseball that hasn't been that good.
And there goes Shane Green's trade value. Right out the door.
No,
Can't move him now. No, he hasn't been that poor of late, but has blown a save. Okay, so he's no longer perfect. Anyways, they're going to look to deal him, Matthew Boyd. They're going to look to deal anybody that's being productive. Nick Castellanos, if he ends up being productive at some point this season, well, they're going to trade him as well. And once again, then it comes into play the issue of who is and who are the true team leaders on this current Tigers roster. Not many to speak of right now, Doc, and that is an issue. But the bigger issue is the talent on the field, and there's not much of it. There aren't the veteran fillers to rely upon. They thought Josh Harrison would be that. Jordy Mercer, Matt Moore. Moore's hurt. Ross is hurt. They thought those guys would be that. Josh Harrison has struggled all season long at the plate. A little bit better of late, can still field and move on the bases, but all these guys that they picked up during the offseason are not producing either.
To answer a question that we did receive actually online on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, why are the Tigers still trotting out Josh Harrison to play? Because his batting average has been subpar, and what we're seeing in the field hasn't been stellar as well.
His ultimate zone rating, though, for second baseman was tops in the bigs recently. So, no, he's getting it done in the field, can still run the bases, has a lot of speed. Just can't hit. So they're going to trot him out because they don't want to utilize, and start the service time of any of their top prospects on the farm that are at AA. And the AAA guys, there's just no veteran fillers there to call up that are going to be much better than Josh Harrison. So you signed Harrison to a major league deal, so why not just keep him on the roster when he's a true veteran leader, by the way. He really is. And he could be a spark plug if he was producing at the top of the lineup. He just isn't. But I think inside the clubhouse, he still brings that positive energy and is a true clubhouse leader.
But Vito, I think fans don't care about service time. They're like, can a player play? Can he come up to the majors and help? Because at any given point, your contract's going to be up. They don't really care about that because, we saw rookies come up and contribute. We've seen teams that have been put together through youth and veteran leadership. So I don't think fans really care about service time. If a player can play and is better than a guy like Josh Harrison, is better than Ronnie Rodriguez, I think the fans are like, these guys are on the field stink. Let's just, what the fans want is kind of like here at the podcast. Oh, you do a podcast for a couple weeks? Oh, you're not here anymore. Just kind of like, just kind of a revolving door. Like, okay, Ronnie Rodriguez will give you 7 days. Oh, you batted 200 this week? See ya. Jacoby Jones, you're still batting, even though he's done a little bit better. And obviously, the news is he switched his hand position and is doing different things.
Career high 4 hits last Friday, and that Lone Tigers win now in their last 13 games. So you got to give Jacoby some credit for that at least.
Doc's peachy positive note of the week. Jacoby Jones is working hard on his hitting, working on his stance, working on his hands. And as a result, hey, hitting the baseball a little bit. Is he somebody that you still want on the team? No, but it's not as bad as it has been. So, peachy positive note of the week, Jacoby Jones hasn't been futile. He's been serviceable.
Barely average. Now we're really reaching here. We're talking about barely average guys and speaking glowingly about them and talking them up. That's how bad the state of the Tigers currently is, and specifically in their lineup from top to bottom. And once again, at AAA Toledo, the reinforcements truly are not there. And that's what scares me for this season, a season which was a lost season from the start, but still might be worse off than I had even thought, Doc. And great, that positions them for that number 1 overall selection in next year's amateur draft. And that's what the Tigers really are playing for and should be playing for. So I'm happy in terms of that. But you do expect a couple of wins here and there, man. It's a more effort on a consistent game-to-game basis. And that's when the fans deserve to be up in arms. It's just the outlook for the month of June doesn't look that much greater. And it's because God, they went 6-18 in the month of May, and I say they arguably play a tougher schedule in June. Okay, they have the Braves coming up, then the Rays at home. You have the Twins at home, the Indians at home, the Nationals at home to end the month of June. You have a lot of tough teams coming up in the month of June, and that scares me and tells me, Doc, the Tigers are going to be well under 500 in the month of June as well.
All right, final segment here. You have a new one that you want to debut, dingers. You're interested in who's going to hit home runs. Why?
Dingers forecast because the chicks love the dingers. So it is the dingers forecast time on this week's episode of Tigers Talk. And in the debut version of the segment, who are you going to go with? And this segment, by the way, just to clear it all up here, is going to be about who you and I, Doc, think is going to hit the most homers for the Tigers until next week's episode, which at times it might only be one home run.
It might be one home run.
Yeah.
But the dingers forecast will be, for me, it looks like strong power is going to come from the bat of Jacoby Jones. Not because of the fact that he's super talented or that he's, changed his swing mechanics. No. They're playing Baltimore, who has given up a plethora of home runs from the research that I did. So give me Jacoby Jones, and I'll start it off by saying he's going to have the most home runs in the next week with 3.
Wow, 3 home runs. Yeah. I'll take 2 out of somebody. And you know who's really due to hit? I got 2 guys that I really like. The one guy that's really due to hit because of some miscues of pass that we harped upon a lot already, Nicholas Castellanos. Could see him. How about Kristen Stewart? The one guy that maybe, just maybe, could be part of the Tigers' long-term future. So I did speak kind of positively about him. So maybe he does deliver 2 home runs. Nick C delivers 3. I'm going to say 2, though, actually. So I'm going to say 2 out of Nick C. And Kristen Stewart, I'm going to say also hits 2. So I'm going to give a tie for the first ever edition of Dingers Forecast on Tigers Talk.
So, Vito, you got Nick Castellanos and Kristen Stewart, huh? And I got Jacoby Jones.
Good luck to you with that one.
Well, probably Miggy with 1 or 2 might also take the cake and have the ability. But John Hicks also sneaky power. Brandon Dixon also, if he gets in the lineup, can do some things. So we shall see what's on tap this week. Who are they playing the rest of the way?
Atlanta after the O's.
Oh.
Yeah, going to be tough there. Versus the Rays at home, then the Twins at home next weekend. When I'm going to be at Comerica, weekend of my birthday, once again, I'll give it a shout out. June 9th is my birthday. Won't be at Copa that game because I'll be celebrating, my 26th birthday, but I'll be there June 7th for that game against the Twins. So tough matchups, man. And did you know, nobody probably even knows because, we haven't talked about it ad nauseum and other people have it on a national basis. But the Twinkies, man, in first place by a lot over the Indians right now. 20 games above 500. I mean, they're killing the baseball, and they look really good right now. And the Indians, man, better watch out because it looks like the Twins are going to take that division from them.
Yeah, Minnesota. Hey, it's an example of, they can turn it around pretty quickly, but they have talent. And
more talent. And a new manager in Rocco Baldelli. Maybe that's helped out a little bit as well, Doc.
Great podcast recording. Man, 45 minutes just flew by. I enjoyed the broadcast. We'll continue to look at the performance of those in the minors. We'll see how they perform game in, game out. Always enjoy the recording of Tigers Talk with you. Stick with us. Each and every week, we talk baseball. We're not shying away from it. Vito and I cover the Tigers as much as humanly possible. We're sticking with it. And some people say, man, I hope you guys are making big money covering the Tigers. Well, we do have sponsors. Thank you very much for that.
And who are they?
The Detroit Sports Commission and DC Sports. Thank you for contributing and allowing us to cover the Detroit Tigers. But hopefully, with the work that we're doing, and I'll tease it, you and I are working on a project with the Detroit Tigers, and hopefully it comes to fruition with my insights and your great editing skills. I think this presentation will go great, and you'll see additional increased coverage from the likes of Doc and Vito when we do go down there. So that's hopefully something that we can look forward to in the weeks ahead. You and I got to work hard on this project and really put together a great presentation.
3 things really quick I'll leave you guys with. Tigers and Nick C specifically, stop being stupid on the base paths. Guys, get on base more often. And Tigers, call up Willi Castro. Do us all a favor. Give us some excitement as Tigers fans moving forward.
For Vito Chirco, I am the Doc, John Macaroon. You can follow Vito on Twitter at Vito Jerome. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. If you're watching the baseball game, feel free. Lob us a tweet at Detroit Podcast. Vito will see it for sure, and we'll have a good time with it. We respond to the majority of tweets. The most interactive Twitter page in the city of Detroit. We love all the fans of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. See you next week, Vito.
Adios.